In 2018, Argentina were a bit of a mess. They had barely qualified for the 2018 World Cup and never convinced in Russia, exiting as one of the disappointments of the tournament. They had gaping holes across the squad, and manager Jorge Sampaoli left to be replaced by interim manager Lionel Scaloni, a man who had never managed a senior game of football, but had once spent 6 months on loan at West Ham. Fast forward 6 years, and Argentina had ended their 28-year trophy drought, won the World Cup, 2 Copa Americas, and put themselves amongst the best international teams of modern times. So what did Scaloni do differently to turn Argentina around? The story of Argentina in the 2010s is inevitably centred on Lionel Messi. Considered one of the greatest players in history before he'd even turned 25, one of the few criticisms levelled at him was that he hadn't won a major trophy with his national side. His 2008 Olympic gold medal just didn't cut it. Argentina, one of the great national sides in football history, became to feel as much a challenge for Messi to complete as a football team in itself. And Argentina had some great players supporting him. In his early days, he could call the likes of Sebastián Verón, Esteban Cambiaso, Juan Román Riquelme, Hernán Crespo and Carlos Tevez teammates. In the 2010s, they added Sergio Aguero, Ángel Di María, Paulo Dybala and Gonzalo Higuaín. They had come close on multiple occasions, reaching the final of the 2014 World Cup and the 2007, 2015 and 2016 editions of the Copa America. For critics like world-renowned tactical expert Piers Morgan, however, that wasn't enough. After that agonising run of 3 final defeats in 3 consecutive summers, Messi retired from the national team briefly in 2016.
Lo pensaba en el vestuario que ya está, se terminó para mí la selección. Ya, como dije recién, son 4 finales, no es para mí. Lamentablemente lo busqué, era lo que más deseaba. No se me dio, pero creo que ya está.
¿Es una decisión tomada?
Creo que sí. No sé.
Before reversing his decision to drag Argentina almost single-handedly to the 2018 World Cup with a hat-trick against Ecuador at Quito. Argentina were poor in Russia, drawing with minnows Iceland before suffering a humiliating 3-0 defeat to Croatia. They escaped the group thanks to a narrow win over Nigeria, but their defence was torn apart by France, and despite the close scoreline, they never looked like ending their 25-year wait for a trophy. Many people said Messi, then 31, would never win his definitive World Cup. Some doubted if we would ever see him in a World Cup again. A lot of Messi's supporting cast, like Tevez, Aguero and Higuaín, had moved on. It didn't look like the quality was there to replace them. Take Messi out of the 11 from their 2018 defeat to France and no one would mistake that team for potential world champions. Manager Jorge Sampaoli left shortly afterwards and was replaced by Scaloni, initially in a temporary role. He used 40 players in his first 12 games and they stumbled through to the semi-finals of the 2019 Copa America, advancing through the groups only with a win over invitees Qatar and beating Venezuela in the quarters before losing to rivals Brazil. Their start to World Cup qualifying was solid, however, and as Scaloni started to work out a formula, he convinced his bosses enough to earn the job on a full-time basis. In the COVID-delayed 2021 Copa America, Argentina topped their group. Their first 3 games were functional rather than exhilarating, before they exploded into life, hitting 7 goals in 2 games against Bolivia and Ecuador. They made it through to the final by beating Colombia in a penalty shootout, new keeper Emi Martinez the hero. He had only just broken into the Arsenal first team a year earlier. Prior to that, he'd been on loan at Reading in the Championship, and had won 2 caps before the tournament. They went into the final against hosts and reigning champions Brazil as underdogs, but by now a new team was coming together, based on a solid rather than spectacular spine. Martinez had become their undisputed number 1 and sat behind the erratic but talented duo of Cristian Romero and Nicolas Otamendi. Leandro Paredes, Rodrigo de Paul and Giovanni Lo Celso sat in a well-balanced midfield, whilst Messi and Di Maria flanked Lautaro Martinez up front. A crowdless stadium definitely levelled the playing field for the visitors, and a single Di Maria goal was enough to win Argentina their first trophy in nearly 30 years. The players ran to celebrate with Messi at full time, almost celebrating the win for him as much as the country. The Scalonetto was up and running, momentum was building, and Argentina fans travelled to Qatar in large numbers, with full belief that they could go all the way. Argentina won the 2022 World Cup in memorable fashion. After losing their opener to Saudi Arabia, they passed through a tight do-or-die game against Mexico thanks to some inspiration from Messi and a goal from the young Enzo Fernandez, before beating Poland to qualify for the knockout round. As the tournament went on, the team started to take shape, with Fernandes coming into the starting lineup alongside Alexis McAllister, who'd replaced the injured Giovanni Lo Celso in the side, and Julian Alvarez replacing the misfiring Lautaro Martinez up front. They didn't have much experience but breathed life into the team, whilst Messi played a tournament for the ages. They beat Australia in the second round despite a late scare, and after letting a 2-goal lead slip late on against the Netherlands, a mistake they definitely wouldn't repeat again, more Martinez heroics saw them through to face Croatia in the semis. They tore the Croats apart in a comfortable semi-final, Messi and Alvarez looking particularly dangerous up top, and set up a showdown with reigning champions France. What followed was one of the most dramatic games in football history. You wouldn't have thought so for the first 80 minutes, however, where Argentina played some scintillating football and were far superior to France, even forcing Didier Deschamps into a double first-half substitution. At times, it looked as much a training session as a World Cup final, but then France woke up, Kylian Mbappe scored 2 goals in the space of a few minutes, and the world gasped that it looked like Lionel Messi's long-awaited World Cup was going to be agonisingly snatched from his grasp. To extra time it went, where Messi put Argentina ahead, and Mbappe levelled the game with his hat-trick. Koolo Muani ran through on goal with seconds left to play, and you know the rest. Messi finally got his hands on the trophy. Argentina erupted in celebration. Emi Martinez pretended the World Cup Golden Glove was his penis. And Cristiano Ronaldo went on a bender so hard he woke up in Saudi Arabia. Argentina followed this up by retaining their Copa America title in the US in 2024, cruising through the group stage before beating Ecuador, Canada and Colombia. This Argentina side was far less reliant on Messi, who picked up a few injuries and only registered 1 goal and 1 assist, with Lautaro Martinez stepping up as their linchpin in his place. In truth though, it was a weaker Copa America. With Brazil in crisis and Uruguay in transition, Colombia provided the strongest opposition. They pushed Argentina all the way in a final that was delayed by fans who couldn't afford the outrageously priced tickets, so broke into the stadium instead. Gianni Infantino obviously wasn't watching. But Argentina were able to grind Colombia down and complete a historic hat-trick of trophies. From the mess Scaloni had inherited a few years earlier, he had created a resilient, trophy-winning machine. He did it by creating a more balanced side, one that could reliably work the ball forward without leaving gaping holes for their opponents. In a way, Argentina and Scaloni's success came because this was a supposedly less remarkable generation. When Argentina were filled with stars, it felt like they were trying too hard to cram them all on the pitch, especially with Maradona in charge. A lot of Argentina's players, like Dybala and Aguero, had similar weaknesses to Messi, and like the Messi, Mbappe, Neymar front line at PSG, it made picking a balanced side difficult. Under Scaloni, Argentina still had great attacking players like Di Maria, Martinez and Alvarez, but crucially they had different skill sets which complemented rather than imitated Messi. They could press, they could play in the spaces Messi didn't, and would make runs to stretch the game and create space for the number 10. Meanwhile, Scaloni benefited from the new midfielders available to him, who had very few weaknesses to their game. Against Iceland in 2018, Argentina struggled to progress the ball up the pitch, and Messi would regularly take the ball in his own half, with 11 men between him and the goal. When they lost to Croatia, they started with Mascherano and Enzo Perez in a 2-man midfield. But Perez was sacrificed for Dybala with a score at 1-0, and with 1 versus 3 in the middle of the park, those 3 being Modric, Rakitic and Brozovic, Argentina completely conceded midfield. Against Croatia in 2022, they had Fernandes, De Paul, McAllister and Paredes. Argentina's attackers could focus their efforts on producing in the final third, knowing the side behind them could provide them with the ball and prevent the opposition from running straight through them. This helped to prolong the legs of Messi, who by this point most of the side had grown up watching and were happy to run the extra mile and play a supporting role for their captain, the likes of De Paul or Alvarez doing all the running he couldn't. These changes coincided with a better team spirit. Everyone knew their role in the team, and there appeared a sense of togetherness in the camp. Messi developed into a leader, showing a more aggressive and slightly arrogant personality that, quite frankly, Argentines love. Scaloni proved himself to be a good tactician, making plans to nullify specific opposition teams and attack their weaknesses. Bringing Di Maria in for Paredes and keeping him wide on the left to pull Koundé away from his comfort zone in the World Cup final being just one example. He got lucky with upgrades coming through in key areas, like Romero and Martinez at the back, but he used them well. He embraced a fresh generation of players to build a functional side which platformed their star player, he fostered a togetherness in the group and made smart decisions in games, as well as receiving some fortunate decisions along the way. 7 years into the Scaloni revolution, some of the players he used to freshen up the side are starting to go stale themselves. McAllister has struggled in the Premier League this year, whilst De Paul followed Messi to Miami and Paredes has returned to Boca Juniors. Otamendi is 38 and Di Maria, so important in those trophy wins, has retired from the national team. Argentina will always produce talented players to fill their place, and the question in 2026 will be whether Scaloni can repeat his trick of bringing youngsters in to freshen up a side. Maybe with the confidence of being champions, a climate that should suit their tempo and a few more fortunate decisions, Argentina can go deep again. Or maybe it will prove one tournament too far. Moving on from a historic side was never going to be easy, let alone moving on from one of the biggest names in the history of the game. But Argentina have got the trophies to show for it, and as much as Argentine fans can never relax, they can watch this summer knowing their team's place in history is already assured.